Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant. The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
In Fairfield County, something new comes across my desk every day. Crimes are committed, cases are solved, and a community is made safe by the hardworking employees of the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office. Welcome to This Week with Sheriff Dave Phelan, a weekly program here on LSN Television. We're also carried by a number of our radio affiliates in Lancaster. Do appreciate you, the viewers and listeners, that join us each and every week. We've got a great guest back by popular demand is Chief Mike Tussey, the Chief of the Baltimore Police Department. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming back and taking time out of your day to share things that are going on in and around Baltimore. Before we see what's happening in Baltimore, let's talk a little bit about your career, because you've been at this a while. You worked for the Lancaster Police Department, Sheriff's Office, Westerville, and now you're the chief.
Yeah, I guess I'm a journeyman, you would say. My major career really started, I guess, with Westerville, but to back up, I spent 7 years, a little over 7 years with Lancaster. Prior to that, I was a year with the Sheriff's Office, and then left, went up for 21 at Westerville. Okay. And then had what has turned out to be an absolutely wonderful opportunity to go to Baltimore and be involved there. So, yeah, I've been very, very, very blessed in my career.
Right. So you worked with Chief Bailey and some of the people over there were there back then?
Really interesting. Chief Bailey and I were on midnight patrol together. Okay. And he was moved to the Detective Bureau, and about 6 months later I was moved to the Detective Bureau. We ended up, all the time we were in the Bureau, we worked partners together. So, yeah, he's a great guy, very knowledgeable, just a really an asset to the Fairfield County law enforcement community.
He sure is. What? So was that kind of tough leaving Lancaster and heading all the way to Westerville? Or?
It was Lancaster, and really the only reason I left was Lancaster at that time was having some really bad financial problems, and they'd given us a heads up and said, we may be laying off as many as a third of the police department, and with a family and all that, sometimes you have to make tough decisions. But I always we've lived in Fairfield County since we were 18 years old, so it's always been my home. And even when I worked in Westerville, I used to tell the guys in Westerville, the best part of my day is when I crossed the county line and saw the Fairfield County sign. Yeah.
So even within the area of Baltimore, a few years ago you put in a firing range.
Yes, we did. And it was interesting because that firing range had actually been there for about 30 years, but it was in amazing disrepair. And what we wanted to do was make it safe for people to use, so the state of Ohio allowed one of their inspectors to come out and give us what we needed for the design. And once we were able to get that functional, then we opened it up to any law enforcement in Fairfield County to use, because as you know, it's getting harder and harder to find anywhere that you can qualify police officers anymore.
Right, and not to say it's even harder to come by ammunition.
Oh,
that's in a shortage today. It's almost amazing.
It really is, and 2 years ago we'd put in an order for our ammunition for the year, and it was almost 6 months from the day that we had ordered that before we got any of that ammunition in.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about an interesting case a number of months ago about an individual that was actually exposing himself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We got a call from a school bus driver, followed up by a call from some parents saying that there was a adult male standing in a second-story window in our uptown area who was fully exposing himself in a floor-length window to school buses as they drove by. So, of course, with something like that, you want to react pretty quickly. So we put a unmarked car with an officer and a video camera and parked it there. And sure enough, when the buses made the corner, there he was. So we rerouted the rest of the buses to make sure that they weren't going to be coming by the address or in the area, and ended up making an arrest. And ultimately, this person has an extensive record for the same sort of thing. A sidebar to that is, which is kind of interesting, Senator Tim Schaefer, I contacted his office and said, look, one of the issues we have with these guys is they're not tier 1, 2, or 3 offenders. So we had no idea this guy was in town. And his office is now drafting legislation that would require any person who's a habitual exposer, when the victims are juveniles, when they're children, would fall into that group where they would have to report to the local agency when they move into town, which I think will be a great tool for all of us.
Right, right. Wow. Well, that is interesting. It's kind of good the way you approach that to number one, make sure the school buses were not going by the next day, and then put the area under surveillance.
Yeah, and this again, he has a lot of issues, and I don't know where you go as far as trying to, one of our big things, contrary to popular belief, we really do want to help people out, but some people you just don't know where to route them to or what to do with them, because it not only is a criminal act, but it almost becomes a lifestyle. They're so accustomed and so ingrained that this is how I act, this is how I portray myself. They're not really interested in any sort of interventions or anything along that line.
Right, right. Baltimore, lots of stuff going on in Baltimore. What do you like best about Baltimore?
Well, coming from Westerville, which is, it's the second largest city in Franklin County, surrounded by 18 precinct Columbus, which is amazingly busy.
Right.
We literally went from call to call to call. So you would get on the scene, you would take a report, and you had calls waiting, so you would jump back in the car, go somewhere else. What I like about Baltimore is that there are times that, people just need somebody to talk to.
Right.
They've been a victim of a crime or whatever. So you have that ability to slow things down and really kind of get back to what we all originally did, and now there's a special term, community policing.
Right.
But back in the day, that's the way we did everything, and I really enjoy that, having those people feeling like that they can call us, and we're not there just for the police side, but maybe to help them out with information or other things along.
Is that one of the things you like to instill in your officers?
Oh, absolutely. And when we begin the process, if we have an applicant, that's one of the biggest things that we do in the interview process is I want to get a feel for what their perception of policing is, and the next thing is how does that relate to what we do on a daily basis. Right,
right. Looking back on your career with Lancaster and the sheriff's office in Westerville and Baltimore, any case that comes to mind that's interesting, I know there's a lot of them, but that kind of stands out that you think might be of interest to us?
Well, as you know, we here in the county, we were fortunate enough to write some grants, and we've got a lot of equipment as far as internet crimes. And while I was at Westerville, we were able to start an internet unit. And one of the people that we arrested out of that was a man who was approaching 50, who thought that he was talking to a 13-year-old girl online, but because we use voice synthesizers, things like that, it was actually one of our detectives. And ultimately, he would make phone calls to talk because he wanted to be sure that this was not a police officer he was about to meet, and insisted on always being called Daddy. And it's kind of become I guess one of our trademark cases up there, the Daddy case. And when we would travel around the state of Ohio and put seminars on, that was always one of the cases we highlighted on how far some of these people are willing to go, some of the risks they take. This was a person that was heavily involved in his church. He was heavily involved in youth sports, had a daughter almost the same age as these girls that he was approaching online, had so much to lose, and literally was willing to throw it all away in order to feed his addiction.
Right. How prevalent is that situation today?
Or
has it gotten any better?
Well, I don't know that it's gotten any better. The difference is where the chat rooms used to be are a real problem, and they're still out there. But now, because everyone on their hip carries a computer, your cell phone has the capability to, all the social media sites or whatever. It's become more personalized. The other side of it is, one of the things we deal with a lot are the parents who will come in and say, I have my daughter's phone, I have my son's phone, and I found this inappropriate photo on it. And of course, we have the ability to download all that data, and even though they think they've erased it, then we find maybe 100 photos, and they're all inappropriate. So we've got these kids now that are taking these inappropriate selfies of themselves. They send it to a friend thinking it's funny. The friend sends it to a friend who sends it to 100 people. And once these things are out on the internet, they're not coming back. They're there forever.
Wow. Is there some things parents can do to help protect their kids? Or
absolutely. One of the biggest is I understand that phones in many cases are a social status sort of thing, but they make phones that do not have cameras. They have limited online availability. That's what I would buy for a child. You can even buy a phone that you program in what numbers they're allowed to call. There's really no reason for a 13 or 14-year-old to have the technology that they have on the phone. The second thing of it is, if you have a computer in the house, make sure you've got the child's password so that you have the ability at any time, and make sure they understand, I will be checking to see where you've been online. And there's several different companies that sell software that counts keystrokes. What it basically does is you can go back, open that up, and it will tell you everywhere that computer has been online. So just a lot of safety things, along with the fact that a computer should never be placed in a child's room where they can close the door, and not so much because the child is going to go in there and do something wrong, but if they become a victim of a predator, a lot of these predators spend hours and hours and hours with these kids, grooming them, with ultimately the goal being to meet them somewhere.
I wonder why more parents don't do that, because I think that's pretty prevalent where parents are not monitoring these. They don't know the password. They are not paying a lot of attention. I mean, good parents. Sometimes I'm just very surprised that people wouldn't. Maybe it's a trust level in their child they have.
That's a big part of it. I think all parents, I think, want to believe the very best in their children.
Sure.
And most parents do the very best they can to keep them at that level where they're doing the right thing. But again, that's not the issue. The issue is not that your child is doing the wrong thing. The issue is your child goes online, meets someone that they think is the same age, who begins to slowly groom them to the point that they find out that this 14-year-old they're talking to online is actually a 38-year-old who lives in Cleveland, who wants to meet them somewhere and take them to buy shoes or to do something that the child has mentioned, hey, my parents won't let me do that. Well, that's all right. Meet me. I'll take you. We'll go do that and start that relationship.
Scary stuff. Bottom line, talk to your kids.
Absolutely.
Make them aware and educate yourself.
Every day.
We're just about out of time. Chief Mike Tussey, Chief of the Baltimore Police Department, with us for the last 2 weeks, and really kind of short notice. We kind of just called you up a little before the program, and you're nice enough to come in and had terrific last couple of shows. I appreciate you and the Baltimore Police Department, all they do, and the good working relationship we have between the agencies. To you, the viewers and listeners, thank you for joining us each and every week. Kelly Roberts, our executive producer, J.T. Bertram, the students here at Fairfield Christian Academy put this program together. They do a great job. Until next week, same time, same place. If you're driving, buckle up. God bless, and we'll see you right here next week.
These waters were woven into the culture of Native American tribes.